find other great podcasts like this one at podmoth.network.
Spooky spirits abound, and it is Halloween time, and as all Halloween's Eve approaches us, there are even more spooky ghouls and goblins on the podcast tonight.
That's right. There are so many creeps in the room on the chat. We have our gorgeous boyfriends on the podcast once again. Round 2, Chris Gale and Joe Gagnier.
Hello.
The boys are back, and they're spookier than ever.
It's true. It's true.
How has the Halloween season been treating you two?
Joe, you first.
Well, life is a terror.
Our apartment complex has been declining in quality, and so we are looking to move to Portland and be closer to you guys.
Team Portland all the way. We're fully in support of this.
We can't wait, honestly. But one of the houses that's in the running to be possibly our new house is but steps away from a cemetery.
Ooh, love that.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that one works out so we can take the dogs on luxurious walks through the cemetery.
Very peaceful at all times.
Are there rules to taking a dog to a cemetery or any animal?
I feel like the poop rule is doubly enforced.
It's way more important to pick up your poop, especially, I would maybe, I don't know, it's hard not to let them run all over the graves.
Yeah.
But I feel like as long as you pick up after them, you know, what's the harm?
Yeah. They're respectful when they go out.
Yeah, and the joy that they bring when they're running around and having fun and playing is something I think ghosts would enjoy.
Well, speaking as someone who used to live by a cemetery, I think it's fine.
Yeah! Oh, I had completely forgotten that one of your last places in Seattle was right by a cemetery.
Oh, yeah. That was good. I could see it. I drove by it every morning, walked through it several times. We took some spooky photos there once. It was a great cemetery all in all. Chris, close your ears. I did once go on a first date walk in that cemetery. Did not go well. Totally fine that didn't work out because I'm happy now. But yeah, that cemetery saw a lot with me.
Yeah, I remember this was like deep during like pandemic times, and Caitlin and I were pretty much the only people we were seeing. And I would like roll up like at night to like park near her house, and I would like stand in the middle of the street for a second to look at the cemetery and be like, I acknowledge you, and then go into Caitlin's house. So I'd be like, I feel your presence, I see you here, now we're gonna go smoke weed. I loved it though. I love saying hi to the ghosts, and if that place does work out, it does have a shared wall, so to do
with the cemetery. Okay.
No, it's a duplex.
Oh, shared wall with the living.
Yeah.
Got it.
Which is worse in our opinion. Yeah.
True. Quick query though is what is your favorite like cemetery urban legend?
I think one of my favorite things, like cemetery lore kind of, is, and we've talked about this many times on the podcast, but the bells that they used to attach to people's either fingers or toes when they would bury people, most prominently in the Victorian times. And, you know, it was so that if they were buried alive, they could ring the bell and someone could come dig them out, because there was a very big fear about being buried alive, because it did actually happen to a couple of people. So it became a trend, and I just am very fully shivered whenever I think about the idea of some graveyard tender walking through the graveyard at night, and they just hear a little tinkle, 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 tinkle. And it's like, it's terrifying, but it's also like, oh shit, I fucked up. Gotta go right that.
Spring into action now.
The way I would shit my pants if that was my job and I had fucked it up. I mean, that's on the doctor or whatever semblance of a doctor you got, but like, you did the burying, so like, it is time to correct.
My favorite bit of cemetery lore is that in the 70s in Britain, there was a couple of ghost hunters that claimed that they could kill the vampire in Highgate Cemetery. Do you remember this, Sophie? And they were like, they wanted to have a duel with each other so that to see who was like the best ghost hunter, basically.
Yes, I do remember that. I love that. That makes me think of like the resurrectionists duel. Two religious guys trying to resurrect. This was, I think, during like associated with the like Waco, Texas cult. There were two leaders within the cult who both believed that they could raise people from the dead. So they got a corpse and for several days tried to raise the person from the dead. It was like, who could do it? Spoiler alert. Neither could.
Nobody.
Yeah.
Hashtag no one.
Hashtag no one. Chris, do you have some favorite cemetery lore?
It's less lore and more of a little myth. When I was coming up, because I was raised Catholic, we had this weird thing where my mom said we could never pass by a cemetery without holding our breaths. And
A classic.
Yeah, and my older brother, Douglas, would gut check people to make sure they were holding their breath.
What an asshole.
Yeah, he's a real piece of shit. Funny guy, real piece of shit.
Hell of a bowler.
Hell of a bowler, honestly. You should see him at 9 innings, honestly. But yeah, that's probably one of mine. It's just like having to hold your breath lest all the spirits get inside you. You know what I mean?
I mean, yes, any orifice is an opening for a ghost.
What about pores?
Yep. That's why you gotta put on a clay mask before you walk by a cemetery.
Are there any known reports of ghosts entering in through every orifice? Like, who cataloged this information for us? What paranormal investigator was like, all right, ear hole, check. Nose hole, check. Butthole, double check.
The Warrens?
For me, that feels like something. Yes, I was just gonna say that feels like something Ed and Warren would do.
Oh my god. Joe, do you have some favorite cemetery lore?
I kind of like a mix of all of yours, but another cemetery myth that was perpetuated by my mother is that it's the best place to teach your kids how to drive a car. Because everyone is already dead.
That's where I learned to drive a car.
Yeah, it's where I learned how to drive a car. It's where the beautiful blondes of the show have learned how to drive a car.
Until I went and dyed my hair brown again.
Oh, damn it. Yeah, I forgot.
Sick.
Yeah. Oh. Cut. Just take that line out.
I'm leaving it. Disappointed.
Suffer.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I was also taught how to drive a car there, and I also kind of think it's hilarious.
I like that you can't kill anyone. They are already dead.
It's true.
You can still cause grievous bodily harm, though.
That's true. That's
Certainly.
true.
Yeah. You're never safe from grievous bodily harm.
In olden days, a glimpse of femur was only for morbid dreamers, but you're not alone. Bring anything bones. Two goofy gals with deathly interest go on a skeleton inquest in your headphones. Anything bones.
Hello and welcome to Anything Bones. My name is Sophie Spelunking Schwartz.
And I am Katelyn Scream Hart. And this is the podcast where we talk about boyfriends, spooky or otherwise. We talk about Halloween. We talk about cemeteries, you know, just the usual dead people stuff.
And bones and bone-related topics.
Oh, yeah. Hi.
Hi, and welcome to something of our Halloween special. A Halloween spooktacular, one might call it.
A Halloween boyfriend spooktacular.
Yeah!
The boyfriend always did it.
It's true. I mean,
It's me.
oh God. Caitlin, watch
I heard
out.
the call.
He's right behind you.
He is behind me.
Yeah. He is literally right behind you.
The calls are coming from inside the Zoom meet.
But yeah, we have our boyfriends on with us today to talk about some scary, possibly, Well, see, we talk about this every year. What is a Halloween topic for us? Because all year round, we talk about ghouls and goblins, but also, bone art, dark history, true crime, hideous murders. So, you got to pick your vibe right when Halloween comes round. Do you go goofy? Do you go spooky? Do you go genuinely terrifying? I'm really excited to share our topic, and I know that you have found quite a doozy yourself.
Yeah, we tag teamed on the research on this one, so it's a couple versus couple.
Yeah. Is it a competition? No.
No, it's a storytelling event podcast. Live. Never mind.
If you're standing outside of our room, this is live.
If you're our neighbors from across the way, this is live. Oh, I see sweet Alice rolling around in the background. She flopped and appeared from behind Chris. Yeah.
She can't help herself. She's very excited to have her people in the same room.
No, sweet girly. Future Sophie here, just popping in to give a quick content warning for extreme claustrophobia. The story that we're going to be discussing today involves someone passing away in an extremely tight space underground. So if that's something that you feel like you can't hear, I would ask that you take care of yourself, and we'll see you in another episode. I also want to put forth here that the incident we're talking about is an accident, and no person is at fault, especially the victim. I wanted to read a little bit about spelunking here, cave diving. This is from the Epidemiology of Caving Fatalities in the United States from Sage Journals. Quote, "This study is a retrospective analysis of caving fatalities in the United States from 1980 to 2008, collected and documented by the National Speleological Society and the American Caving Accidents Annual Publication. During the study period, there were 877 incident reports involving 1,356 individual cavers. During this time, 81 fatalities occurred, which constituted 6% of all individuals with a reported incident. There were no deaths reported in the years 1981 and 2005. Although this data set is limited, it appears that awareness of safety and proper planning is the most important factor in preventing deaths. In large proportion of deaths, it was speculated that caver inexperience contributed to the fatalities. So while the rate of deaths among cavers is relatively low, spelunking should always be taken seriously, and the subject of our story today took spelunking very seriously. Now, on to our story. Thank you so much for listening. So, shall we get started with this bone marathon?
Yes, please.
Because I predict this will be a 2-part episode. I know. I'm making a prediction now. I'm looking into my orb. Well, actually, I don't have my orb. My orb is in the living room.
And as the
You are orbless?
she is orbless.
I'm orbless! You've caught me orbless!
And as the editor of the podcast, she will not be biased at all.
Nope. This will all be keeping in. Kept in. So we are going to be going first. So Joe found this topic tootling around the internet. I think you found it on Instagram.
Actually, I was on the toilet. I'm just kidding.
As we all know, some of the best research is done on the toilet.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you have a lot of time to think.
That's where I do all my thinking.
And all my stinking.
Hey.
True.
Oh.
But when he came and presented this topic to me, I said, that's terrifying. It put a chill down my spine because we're going to be talking about a caving accident today.
Oof.
Spelunking, the practice of cave diving. This is the story of John Edward Jones and his extremely unfortunate demise inside of a cave. So this cave, I'm going to send you the name of this cave. When Joe first brought me this case, I was like, this is so tragic. And he didn't tell me the name of the cave. He just like told me a story. I was like, oh goodness. So I was like, I'll do more research on that. And then I figured out what the name of the cave is. And I thought, that can't be it. They must have changed it. They didn't.
Uh-oh.
This is the name of the cave.
Nutty Putty Cave?
Yes.
Really?
Absolutely.
We're gonna.
I don't like that.
It was almost worse.
It was almost worse.
How could it be worse?
We'll get into that later.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
So I'll get our sources off the top really quickly.
I'm source number 1.
Source number 1 is Joe. We also have Wikipedia, All That's Interesting, HowStuffWorks.com, Brandon Kowalis's blog, and findagrave.com. So the subject of our story today is a man named John Edward Jones, and him and his family had been lifelong spelunkers. They loved to do cave exploration, and his father frequently took him and his brother Josh on caving expeditions in Utah where they lived. And during this childhood of exploring caves, they learned to really appreciate the beauty of caves. At the age of 26, John was living his best life. He had been married, he had a 1-year-old daughter, and he was actually attending medical school in Virginia. And he had come home to Utah for Thanksgiving break to be with his family, and they all wanted to go on a caving expedition, but John had actually not been in a cave in years. But they all decided to go anyway because it was something that the family loved to do. At this time, John was 6 feet tall and about 200 pounds, so a bit bigger than he was when he was a kid.
Sure. I mean,
An adult man versus when he was a teen boy.
see, me at any age, I'm like, caves freak me out. We went to the Oregon caves when I was a kid, and I'm good after that.
Oh.
It's eerie, it's spooky. I don't necessarily like being underground. It's a solid no for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I think caves are really fascinating. My family also took me to some caves. They took me to a place called Moaning Caverns. And it was called that because when the wind goes through the cavern, it makes like a scary moaning sound.
Or a sexy
good.
moaning sound.
I would have to go back as an adult to know if the moaning was erotic.
It's all about the headset, the headspace that you're in when you go into the cave.
Yeah, if you're a cave pervert.
It's like that dress where people are seeing like black and gold, blue and
Or
green,
blue or
whatever.
black, yeah.
Yeah.
Is it sexy moaning? Is it scary moaning?
How you
Depends.
feeling when you get to the entrance? That's how it'll be.
Yeah, exactly. So getting back to John Edward Jones, he's, like I said, he was 26 at the time. His brother Josh, his closest brother, was 23, and them along with 9 other friends and family members decided that they were going to do an exploration of Nutty Putty Cave together just a couple of days ahead of Thanksgiving. I'm going to pass things off to Joe to talk a little bit about Nutty Putty Cave.
The cave, which was first explored in 1960 by Dale Green and Friends, is currently owned by the Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration. The cave system was named after the putty-like texture of the soft brown clay found in many of its passages.
This is such a no. Such a no.
No. Like, it sounds like it's kind of quicksandy at points, which is like, get the fuck out of there. Like,
A cave that, like, wants to swallow you.
yeah, this cave is hungry.
Like, maybe it's the name because Nutty Putty almost sounds like Nutter Butter to me.
Ooh.
So I'm like imagining someone like wading through a cave of peanut butter.
Green originally thought of calling it silly putty because the clay, composed of silicon dioxide, commonly found in sand, would change from a solid to an elastic fluid when lightly squeezed, like silly putty.
So the man was going to call it Silly Putty Cave.
And then someone was like, nah, bro, let's make it way hotter.
Yeah. He was like, silly's not enough. Nutty.
Well, he later decided that Nutty Putty Cave sounded better.
Do we agree on that?
Hard pass. Immediate.
Would you rather die? You have to die in one of these caves. Would you rather die in the Nutty Putty Cave or the Silly Putty Cave?
Counterpoint, I would rather die anywhere else.
That's fair.
Are either of you claustrophobic?
No, not I.
Not particularly, but I think I just don't like the idea of a cave because that also brings up cave-in situations to mind. So, yeah, no thank you.
I think I got turned off the idea of caves ever since I saw the movie The Descent in my formative years, where a group of female spelunkers go into a cave and then there's little Nosferatus. And I was like, I don't know if I want to live in Nosferatu caves my whole life. I think I'm okay above ground.
I'm not claustrophobic within good taste. Like, I'm fine in a confined area, but like this guy had like pressure being put on his chest and was like in a very, very tight area. And I think I would have kind of a claustrophobic reaction under those circumstances.
Yeah, that sounds more like being buried alive.
Yeah, that's when it's like that adds a whole new level of stress to it. But it's like, you know.
Yeah, we'll revisit this discussion when we look at the pictures.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so pretty much all caves form in limestone over extremely long periods of time. The limestone is slowly eaten away by the slightly acidic groundwater. Nutty Putty is also a limestone cave, but instead of being dissolved by water dripping in from above, it was created from the bottom up by hydrothermal activity.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Reverse cave.
Nutty Putty is a hypogenic cave formed when superheated water is forced upward into a bed of limestone, and the minerals in the water eat away at the rock above to create the cave shafts.
Shaft.
These types of caves are very complex and feature lots of domes and three-dimensional passages. It had tight squeezes that opened up into a big room and then back into another tight squeeze.
So it's like the passage's balloon.
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah, they kind of open and close, you know, ebb and flow type of a thing.
In the most terrifying way possible.
In the most terrifying way possible. And it becomes quite spacious at times and quite not spacious at other times.
And it can trick the mind.
Yeah. And you're in a cave the entire time, so you have no real bearing of what's going on.
If you're just constantly going to smaller spaces and bigger spaces, it's like, how do you keep track of where you are and where you've been?
And plus, but at that point in it, like, you are your light source there. Like, you know, he was there relatively late anyways, but yeah, I mean, at that point, you know, you provide your own light.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it contains 1,400 feet, around 430 meters of chutes and tunnels, and prior to closure had been accessible via a narrow surface hole. See email with pics.
Yeah, if you would like to open up will you forward that to Chris? I realized I forgot to send it to Chris.
I'm so sad.
I'm sorry, Chris.
I'm so unincluded.
No, do not feel unincluded. You will receive the picture of the scary cave hole.
Yeah, it's even worse than I had imagined.
I think it's the second picture, maybe.
Well, so the diagram is just kind of like, it gets big and then it's small. And then there's one picture of a guy like with a headlamp and he's like shimmying through and he doesn't really have any give. It looks really scary.
That picture, if you can see the guy's hand, he's putting his thumb on the roof of the cave and he's putting his pinky on the ground of the cave.
Yeah, now I can see it. So you fully have to be like shimmying or like army crawling on your belly to get through this part. I couldn't. At this point, I'd be like, yeah, like take me back to the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see that the entrance of the cave is just a big hole in the ground.
Yeah, there's no reason that anybody should go down that hole.
It's a scary hole.
Big scary hole.
Big scary hole. But yeah, so since its discovery, this cave has had 4 separate rescues of cavers And there's a group of Boy Scouts who got stuck.
It was a popular area for Boy Scouts to like learn caving skills, but they would get stuck kind of often.
Yeah.
Well, they're small.
Yeah,
typically.
That's why they can be saved.
So it's been 4 rescues since it was discovered. What year was it discovered again?
1960.
That's intense. That almost feels like too many for the skill level.
I don't know if it was discovered in 1960, but it was first explored in 1960, so it was probably mapped first in 1960.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I bet native peoples knew about it.
Yeah, honestly, it's probably pretty old news to a lot of people. They were like, yeah, we were staying out of there since like the 1800s. Like, what
Exactly.
Oh, you went in the big hole in the ground?
Yeah.
Why would you
go
do
into
that?
hole in the
Yeah.
ground?
It's like, yeah, we called it Nutty Buddy. What do you guys call it? we call it the mouth of the devil.
We call it Death Forever Cave.
Death's mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in 2006, an effort was put forth to study and severely limit the number of visitors allowed inside the cave. At that time, it was estimated that the cave was receiving over 5,000 visitors per year.
That's so many people willing to do this.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's insanity for something.
And then there were only 4 like documented rescues.
Yeah.
That's
Which is
pretty good
actually
odds,
pretty
I
good.
guess.
It's pretty, yeah.
But
All things considered.
I still wouldn't put myself in the situation.
Oh, no. And the people that were putting themselves in the situation were often entering the cave late at night and failing to take the proper safety precautions.
Okay, then that's your own fault,
Yeah.
honestly.
Oh, yeah. But it's still just, horrifying.
yeah.
The cave's popularity had caused excessive smoothing of the rock inside the cave to the point where it was predicted a fatality would occur.
So, like, there's been 4 rescues up to this point, but the cave is constantly changing because of people's exploration of the cave.
Yeah, and then also the water erosion is still happening at the same time. So it's being eroded by 2 different factors, and then it's also got a silly putty-like texture to begin with.
So
Insane.
So yeah, not that great.
I feel like everything about this cave is nature saying, don't come in here.
Yeah, the cave had been closed on and off over the years due to the incidences of people getting stuck. The cave had only been reopened for 6 months in 2009 when John and his family had decided to enter.
So back to our friend John Edward Jones, now that we know more about the cave he's about to enter. John Edward Jones and his family enter the cave around 8 p.m., which is like, why are we starting? I don't know if this is a spelunking thing. I didn't have time to look that up, if it's typical to spelunk at night. I guess it doesn't matter because there's no light down there anyway.
Yeah, it just seems like I would want to be doing this when there are like other resources available, like police and rescue and all that.
I'm looking it up, and caves are apparently warmer at night.
Okay, that makes sense. You
All
had
right.
hypothesized it was the temperature thing.
Yeah.
So John Edward and his family are entering the cave at night for temperature reasons. And this is on November 24th, 2009, just a couple of days before Thanksgiving. Like we said, it had been years since John had been caving. His family started exploring around 8, and they started making their way through the big slide. If you see that on your diagram, it's kind of one of the biggest descents in the cave. And about an hour into exploring, John decided that he wanted to find the formation known as the birth canal, which is a tight passage that you have to crawl through very carefully, of the caliber of the pictures that I sent you. That tight of a squeeze, just a hand and fingers width. So he goes through what he thinks is the birth canal formation, and he's inching his way through, and he's using kind of his whole body to like wriggle along on his stomach, wiggling his hips, using his fingers to like pull himself along. But within minutes of making this exploration, he realized that this was a big mistake.
Oh, God.
Yeah, he had entered what was actually an unmapped passageway, which he believed to be the birth canal, but it wasn't. It was actually a dead end, and he had to try to go down this narrow vertical downward fissure to try to escape. At this point, John realized that he was getting stuck and he had no room to turn around. He didn't have room to try to even wriggle backwards. So he had to try to go forwards, and he tried to exhale all the air from his chest so that he could fit his body through this really tight passageway. But then when he breathed back in and expanded his chest, that's when he got stuck.
Oh, God. So I'm guessing he's got to be at the front of his family then.
He went off by himself.
Oh. Oh, God. This is horrifying.
His brother was the first to find him. His brother Josh, that we talked about earlier, his younger brother. And he tried to pull on his brother's calves, but he couldn't free him. And then John it loosened him a little bit so that he slid down further, becoming even more stuck.
Oh, God.
And now he was pinned with his arms beneath his chest.
Oh, God.
And he couldn't move at all. And all this is happening. He had entered head first, so he is upside down.
That's so rough, because imagine being Josh in this situation when you're going down there to try and rescue your brother. You get a little bit of leeway, and then it just gets so much worse.
I can't even imagine.
Kuno is also horrified by it.
Yeah. So Josh realizes that this is beyond him. He needs to get help. And so he makes his way to the exit of the cave and sounds the alarm. Josh is able to call for help, but his brother John was trapped 400 feet into the cave and 100 feet below the ground.
Oh, my God.
And gathering equipment and people would end up taking over an hour already.
Jeez.
And it's, 9-10 p.m. probably by this point.
Yeah, it's a really hideous situation. And at this point, they were sending out the call for small cavers, cavers of small stature. The first rescuer to reach John was a woman named Susie Motola, and she was a 5'3" caver, and I'm also 5'3", so representation. We love Susie. So she arrives at 12:30 a.m. on November 25th. So we've already passed the midnight mark. And at this point, John had been trapped in that upside down position for 3.5 hours.
I can't even imagine. You would get delirious, I would think, with the blood rushing to your head.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Hideously, unimaginably uncomfortable. As she's climbing down to reach him, all she can see is his pair of navy and black running shoes. She introduces herself to him, and he is quoted as saying, quote, "Hi, Susie. Thanks for coming, but I really, really want to get out."
Oh.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Over the next 24 hours, 137 rescuers worked to try to free John Edward Jones. And the best plan that they came up with many experienced cavers lending their expertise, was a system of pulleys and ropes to try to free John from this impossible situation.
I'm Emily.
I'm Neve, and we're the hosts of Rowan and Pine. If you're like us and you've always had a little bit of a fascination with folklore, mythology, supernatural, spooky stuff, then our podcast is for you.
You can find us on your favorite platform.
We just wrapped season 2, but you can just dip in anywhere, from our witchcraft mini-series to an episode about Greek mythology or maybe a haunted object.
We also have a bunch of short episodes out there if that's what you're into.
Those are for things like the origin of the jack-o'-lantern or who the Sin Eaters were.
Go check it out, and fuck yeah, folklore.
Went into the Nutty Putty Cave was a challenge even for experienced spelunkers. Most of the passages were dangerously narrow even at the entrance. The downward angle which John was trapped was putting great stress onto his body because such a position requires the heart to work incredibly hard to continuously pump blood up and out of the brain. When the body is right side up, gravity does the work. Rescuers tied John with a rope connected to a series of pulleys. Everything was ready, and they pulled as hard as they could, but suddenly, without warning, one of the pulleys failed. The rope and pulley operation was no more. The rescuers had no other viable plans, and John was trapped. The walls just simply couldn't support frames for the pulleys.
Because of its putty-like texture.
Yeah.
Ugh, that's just so awful.
So
really
the supports would just rip out of the walls.
Yeah. And as the hours went by, things for John became increasingly bleak. One cave diver and rescuer, Brandon Kowalis, who assisted in John's rescue attempts, recounts what he experienced on that day on his blog. Quote, "On the way out of the cave, I spoke with Andy Armstrong. I asked him how John was doing, and he said that he was quickly going downhill, that he was in and out of consciousness, and had started talking about seeing angels and demons around him."
Oh my god.
Yeah. Quote, "John's feet were about 6 feet past the constriction, and I was able to shift myself to the side of him and down the 4-foot wide fissure. After stabilizing myself by jamming my body into a narrower section of the crack, I began speaking to John, asking him how he was and introducing myself. There was no response. I shifted my position a little and tapped him on the leg. I could hear him breathing a deep gurgling breath, as though his lungs were filling with fluid. Then his feet shifted as though he were trying to maneuver his legs out of the crack he was jammed in. The kicking looked fairly frantic, and after a second, he stopped, and it looked as though he had drifted into unconsciousness."
Oh god.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
I continued tapping him on the legs and the hip to see if I could get a response, but there was no response. Brandon Kowalis was the last rescuer to make his way down to Jones, and ended up being the last person to see him alive.
Man. And after everyone tried for over 24 hours, that's got to be really heartbreaking to be there, to be one of those rescuers.
Yeah, and there were so many different people. Like, we didn't have time to go through every single caver that went down there to try to check out the situation, but there were so many people who they called all the tiny cave divers and they were like, please help.
Yeah.
And so many people tried.
Yeah, with no hope of rescue and his heart having suffered hours upon hours of strain due to his downward position, John was pronounced dead of cardiac arrest shortly before midnight on the evening of November 25th, 2009.
Man.
Rescuers had spent 27 hours trying to save John. His family thanked rescuers for their help despite the horrible news. Rescuers also concluded that it would be too dangerous to attempt to retrieve his body. The landowner and Jones' family came to an agreement that the cave would be permanently closed, with his body sealed inside as his final resting place and as a memorial to Jones. Explosives were used to collapse the ceiling in the Ed's Push passageway of the cave close to Jones' body, and the entry points to the cave were permanently sealed by filling them with concrete to prevent any further access.
See, it's a little late, guys, but I think that was the right move.
That was definitely the right move.
It's really sad because there were some people who thought that they could retrieve him, but I think it is definitely for the best.
Yeah, I think it's for the best. And, it sucks that it had to get to that terrible of a circumstance for it to be closed, but it was unsafe, so it's just good that it was closed in the end.
But also, can we rename the cave?
I would be okay with that.
Yeah.
I think it makes the most sense just to name, if it's supposed to be like an acting memoriam to him, I think it's only right that you would name it after him.
Right?
Right?
Yeah.
And not keep this weird, stupid name that some explorer in the 1960s who's probably on a bunch,
It's really dumb.
Yeah. Like, I know that it's because it's of the clay and everything, but it's like, come on. This is the name of... I guess he would have no idea that someone would pass away in that cave.
No, but, now that we know, we can rename it. It's okay.
Many of the volunteer rescuers were traumatized by this experience. I know, bud. And some haven't entered... Okay, yeah, bud. And some haven't entered a cave since. Some have not been able to stop going over the details and wondering if they could have done differently and if he could have been saved.
Yeah, the guilt must be insane.
Yeah.
Not just the rescuers, but like the family that wanted this trip.
Oh, yeah.
And like, can you imagine Thanksgivings from then on?
Oh, so traumatic.
Yeah, permanently marred.
Yeah, and they were like a big Mormon family, so he had a lot of like nieces and nephews too. It's really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And he had a 1-year-old daughter, is that right?
Yeah.
God.
Matt Paulson, who is the chair of the Timpanogos Grotto, the local branch of the National Speleological Society that once managed access to the Nutty Putty, and an experienced cave diver himself, had this to say. As cavers, that's one of the things we're taught not to do. Go headfirst into a tight squeeze going downward. Had he been oriented the other way, it's my opinion he would have gotten out.
That, yeah, maybe. We'll never know.
We'll never know.
Yeah,
So,
but it's sad because he like didn't realize he was going into an unexplored passage. So it's like if he was indeed going in the birth canal, it would have been okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Personally, for me, I think saying stuff like that post-mortem is really kind of off the cuff. It's kind of weird to say like, oh, well, if he did it right,
yeah, it's
we
kind
wouldn't
of
have
rude.
this problem.
Yeah, and I don't want anything that we say to come off as victim blamey.
Yeah.
Because, like, so many people spelunk to this cave. 5,000 people a year. And, you know, it was considered safe enough to be open for the public. And so if it's open for the public, then you have to consider that inexperienced people or people who haven't been in a cave in a while might come and cave dive there. I don't think that, like, yeah, I don't think that we should be blaming John Edward Jones
Not at all.
for what happened to him. Those caves are extremely confusing, and I could never do what he did, you know?
Yeah.
This story is just so tragic. There is a picture of him and his daughter in the email. He was, of course, a young, loving father and husband, and he had a bright future ahead of him in medicine. Like I said, he was actually studying to be a pediatric cardiologist. So a child's heart doctor, like pretty much the best type of person, you know, like a person who's like, I'm going to help heal children's hearts. Literally.
Yeah, just that's so sad.
Yeah.
It was extremely sad. He was incredibly devoted to his faith as well. He was in the Church of Latter-day Saints. From an excerpt on findagrave.com, quote, "The family would like to express its heartfelt gratitude to all those who participated in any way in the brave and extensive rescue efforts on his behalf. The family also thanks everyone for the tremendous outpouring of love and support that they have received during this hard time. We'll never truly understand how or why it was John's time, but we will find comfort in knowing that he fulfilled his purpose here on earth and that we will be reunited with him again."
Yeah. What else can you say? That's so sad.
Yeah.
It's hideously tragic. He died in such an agonizing way.
Yeah.
But it is hopeful to know that, like, so many people, so many different cavers from all over came to try to assist him. Yeah, I can't say anything else other than it's heartbreaking.
Well, good job, you guys. Jesus.
Yeah. Jeez.
Thank you. When you first hear about these stories, people always kind of go for the shock headline, with Instagram posts or with things like this, where there's a true story behind it, but there's some sort of like shock value post that is made about it. And that's what catches your attention.
Yeah.
And then when you look into it further, you're like, oh God, this is just like a very tragic story. And the details of it are probably one of the most horrifying things that I've read in a long time.
Yeah, there was I don't remember exactly how long ago, but the Morbid podcast that I listened to a lot, they covered this. So as soon as you said Nutty Putty, I was like, this is familiar.
Mm.
And it's just, it's a cautionary tale. It's also like, it's amazing to see like the outpouring of support and how many people came to help for 27 hours. But yeah, I'm really glad that they closed that cave down after all this.
Yeah. Yeah, it was for the best.
Thank you again for listening to part 1 of our Halloween special with our wonderful boyfriends, Joe and Chris. We will be back next week with part 2, Katelyn and Chris's story. But in the meantime, if you would like to check out other episodes, they are available everywhere you find your podcasts. And you can also check us out on Instagram at Anything Bones Podcast.
There's only one thing left to say. Boys, 1, 2, 3.
Oh my God, Zoom thinks we're singing.
We are.
I got that message too. It's like, are you playing music? No.
I am the music.
Thanks for listening to Anything Bones. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Anything Bones Podcast, or email us at anythingbonespodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you to Nick Kruger for our spooky music and Stephen Vetteroff
At Chubby Scrubby on Twitter.
for our jazzy vocals, and thank you to Camilla Franklin
At Camilla Strader on Instagram.
for our beautiful bony artwork. Please rate, review, and subscribe.
Yeah.
The Shafts of Nutty Putty.
The shafts of the Nutty Putty.
Delicious. Love it. Continue.